So, for the first time in American history, the House of Representatives have removed the Speaker. It's called a motion to vacate the chair, but it's basically when the elected leader of the majority party is fired. So, let's talk about how it all went down. The majority party gets to choose their own leadership, and the minority party has to just accept who they choose. That's why the Republicans had to deal with Nancy Pelosi for so long. She was the Democratic House leader, and when the Democrats had the majority, they chose her for Speaker. That's how it works. But this week, for the first time ever, the majority party seemingly gave away their own power in an act of either ineptitude or sabotage. To remind you, it took Kevin McCarthy 15 votes to become Speaker in the first place because he couldn't rally enough of his own party to win. No Republican could. They couldn't agree on anything. It was embarrassing, it highlighted the division in the Republican Party, and no work could get done in the House while it was going on. So, in order to secure his vote as Speaker, McCarthy ended up making a bunch of terrible deals with some truly terrible people. One of the concessions he made to get the job was to give away his job security. Kevin accepted a rule proposed by the far-right Freedom Caucus of his own party that lowered the threshold to call to vacate the chair, or in regular terms, to vote to fire him, to only one person. At the time, most of us could see that was a pretty bad idea, because it's hard to be the boss if your job can just be taken from you at any time. The Freedom Caucus basically said, okay, we'll let you have the job just as long as you do everything we want. But if you don't do everything we want, we're going to get rid of you. And shocker, they got rid of him. I mean, you make a deal with the devil, don't complain about the heat. You know what I'm saying? But I know that there's some people out here saying, but wasn't it the Democrats who voted against him? Well, yes, they did. But nothing would have happened if they hadn't been joined by 8 Republicans. Remember, the Democrats are not the majority. They can't do anything without Republican sign-off. The rule to vacate the chair was proposed by Republicans, agreed to by McCarthy, and then called for by Republicans. The Democrats had nothing to do with any of that. Sure, they could have saved him when the vote was called, but why would they do that? Kevin has done nothing since he became Speaker other than to prove himself to be a calculated liar who couldn't be trusted. He made deals, then he reneged on them. He blamed the Democrats for his own mistake. He promised Joe Biden he would fund the government, and then he changed his mind. He allowed a baseless impeachment inquiry into the president without any evidence. And then time and time again, he seemed to be taking his marching orders directly from Mar-a-Lago. In fact, his inability to be trusted was one of the reasons his own party called him to be removed. Remember, the minority party has zero obligation to vote for someone other than their own leader to be Speaker. And ultimately, who runs the House is not the minority's choice. So they're not responsible for who the majority chooses to lead them. Kevin actually probably could have gotten enough Democrats on board to allow him to keep his job if he had just considered negotiating with them or offering them something that they might have wanted. Funding for Ukraine, power sharing on committees, a clean budget to fund the government longer than 45 days. Any sort of reasonable effort to come to some sort of good faith compromise would have gone a long way. After all, the Democrats had just saved his ass voting to pass his bill to keep the government open, and Kevin thanked them by going on TV and blaming them for wanting to shut down the government, when it was his own party who voted to do that. So when Matt Gaetz called for a vote to vacate the chair, the Democrats simply did exactly what they'd done the first 15 times Kevin's name came up for Speaker, and they voted that he wasn't right for the job. They didn't think so 9 months ago, and they don't think so now. So this isn't on the Democrats. This is on Kevin and his completely dysfunctional party. And if you're thinking, okay, but wasn't it really hard for him because he only had a slim majority in the House? Yeah, that's difficult. There's very little wiggle room when you only have a small majority because you can't afford to lose any votes. But when the roles were reversed and the Democrats had the exact same 5-seat majority, Nancy Pelosi was able to rally her party and in some cases Republican representatives to pass, among other things, the American Rescue Plan, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act, the PACT Act, the CHIPS Act, the Respect for Marriage Act, the Gun Safety Bill, and the Inflation Reduction Act. So while leadership with a small majority is hard, it's clearly not impossible, as long as you have good leadership and people willing to do the job. What we need to talk about is the fact that Republicans no longer seem interested in doing the job. Republicans can't govern, and it's not entirely clear that they even want to anymore. These are government workers who can't even agree to keep the government running. Their own salaries coming in, sure, but the government actually functioning for the American people? Not a priority. The Republicans can complain, they can obstruct, they can distract, they can waste taxpayer dollars on endless congressional hearings based on conspiracies without evidence, they can hold up appointments, they can shut down the entire system, but they cannot do the job they were hired to do because they've allowed a handful of media whore anarchists to take over their party and they're too afraid of being primaried to stand up to them. We know the majority of House Republicans are not extremists, and yet they may as well be because their silence is allowing the chaos agents to get their agenda accomplished. Where is the backbone of the grand old party? Where's the honor? Where's a single thought for the American people? The Republicans could work with the Democrats and just shut this nihilistic behavior down. They simply lack the will to do so. The Democrats have shown they're willing to work with reasonable Republicans in good faith for the American people, but they need partners willing to do the work with them. Until enough Republicans find the courage to stand up for democracy, or we return the House to Democratic control, these extremists are going to continue to be emboldened. The American people deserve a functioning government. This group is going to burn the house down with all of us in it because their criminal boyfriend told them to. Stop letting them gaslight you to look away from their own failures. Demand better, or accept far worse.